Thank you for tuning in to another episode of my Veterans to Success podcast. You probably know by now, my mission is to help 1 million veterans and entrepreneur business owners achieve the dreams, goals, and aspirations they deserve. That is why I created the Veterans to Success podcast, because I get to interview guys, men and women, who want to share their fascinating stories with you about their time before, during and after their time in the military, so you can benefit and overcome your challenges. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be mesmerized, astounded, and entertained. Hello and welcome to this episode of Veterans to Success, the podcast where I get to speak with seemingly ordinary people who have extraordinary stories. And today I've got with me Emma Riley. Emma, hello.
Hi there, Joe. I'm good, thank you.
That's good. Excellent. Right, so you know the score, no fanfare for the common man or common woman. We just dive straight in and we start from when you were a young girl. What was going on in your life way before your military career?
So I had a great family upbringing. I had great parents, and you know, as far as home life is concerned, it was very lovely. I was not so lucky when I went to school. I got quite severely bullied throughout my school career. So I had this sort of dichotomy, and a terrible school life and a really nice home life. We used to go sailing every weekend. My dad was really into sailing, so every weekend and every holiday we'd be out on the boat and enjoying the Solent and all of those great areas around there. But yeah, school was not kind to me. So I was maybe 13 or so, and at school we had a careers fair. And one of the stands on the careers fair was the army. And this kind of piqued my interest because I'd always been quite practical and quite interested in being active and so forth. And also suddenly there's this opportunity to serve, to be part of something bigger than yourself. And most importantly, in some ways at that moment, it was a chance to be somewhere that you could belong and have a tribe of people. You know, that there is always that ideal understanding that you have, that you were going to be a comrade to somebody. You're going to have that sort of close bond that only the military life can give. So that was really attractive. Now, the army wasn't really that attractive to me, but as I said, we were always sailing. So the Royal Navy became the thing that I focused on.
Fantastic. Now, I just want to go back to bullying, because I experienced bullying when I was at school, and it can be quite debilitating, can't it?
Very much so.
Yeah. And how did that affect you, if you don't mind me asking? But you know, in school life?
Well, I mean, I got bullied because I had red hair, so I'd be
Right.
called Briselle. I had short hair, so I'd be called a boy, and I was a bit of a tomboy, so fine. It was where I lived wasn't the standard for the area, so that became an issue. So being othered meant that I didn't have a lot of friends. I had a very small group of friends. And you know, you run the gamut every day. You're fearing to go in and see what's happening to you. When I went to secondary school, for example, I went to one of the local secondary schools, and after about, I think it was 1 or 2 terms, my parents had to move me because I'd been beaten up on the way back home from school. And in fact, one of the teachers had not exactly been very helpful in a particular situation. So
Right.
I had to change schools, which then makes you doubly an outsider when you go into secondary school and you're like 2 terms that you haven't been there. And so yeah, it's all about that othering and exclusion. So you become quite introverted, if you like. You also learn not to trust people very much. So making friends becomes a lot more difficult as well.
Well, I think you did tremendously to overcome that, because bullying, as I say, can be debilitating, and it ruins a lot of lives. And I never understand bullies. I remember when I was fortunate enough, I suppose, to stand up against this bully, and you know what? Never touch me again, because you know, I think that they like to feel in charge, don't they?
I think there's an element for a bully, generally speaking, that they are not in charge somewhere else in their lives. And so they use the power that they feel that they can gain in a school setting or in a, you know, a one-on-one setting, to be able to feel more, you know, in control themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's lots of reasons why a bully becomes a bully, but that tends to be a big one.
And that's there's a whole psychology. I'm sure we could talk about that for hours.
Yes.
So 13, the army, you see that, but then of course it follows that if you're sailing on the Solent every weekend with your father and you're having a great time there, the Navy start calling you, doesn't it?
Definitely.
So what year was that?
So that would have been, well, 20. So I did my GCSEs in the first year that they appeared, and then I did A levels. So because at the time I wasn't old enough to join, so I did A levels and did 2 years of that and managed to get an ungraded and a nearly graded. I was quite proud of the nearly graded, so very much failed my A levels, but in that year that I joined, which was 1990, the beginning of the year, I applied and I went through that whole process of joining up. And I could have waited to see if my results would have been better, but really I knew they weren't going to be. So I applied and I joined as a rating at the beginning. Well, so I turned 18 in July and I joined in July. So 1990 in July, that's when I joined up, before I ever knew how badly I'd failed my A levels, but it didn't matter to me. It was all about just getting into there.
So that's pretty quick off the block.
Yes.
July, and then you're in July.
Yep.
That beats me. Yeah.
That, I mean, as in, I probably applied like 3 or 4 months or whatever beforehand, and there happened to be an opening. And in fact, when I joined, I was in the last class of Wrens to be trained separately from the men, so Series 31 at HMS Raleigh. And so when we passed out, it was the end of an era. That was the end of the Wrens being a separate entity, if you like, when it came to training. Because at that point in the RN Wrens history, Wrens were starting to go to sea. So when I'd done my basic training and they sat us down at the end of it and said, you can either go ahead as a Wren and do as you had, signed up to, or you can volunteer for sea, and then you can go back and do your secondary training and then come back and do your sea training and do that. And I was like, yep, sign me up. I definitely want to do that.
Thank you. And that's interesting, because one of the things I like to cover on this is how you deal with failure. And failure isn't fatal, is it? I mean, it's just a sign to say, okay, well, you didn't get that right this time, so what can you do next time? And you'd already seen the writing on the wall, right, with your A levels, and thought, right, so what can I do instead? So you went and signed up. How did that manifest itself in your mind? Because, you know, just touching back on the bullying, you've got to have a strength of character to be able to overcome that. I feel, my observation when I talk to people who have been bullied and watched how they've changed their lives as a consequence, then you've got to have some mettle to actually say, oh, I failed the A levels, what can I do now? What was going on in your mind?
Well, frankly, I did my A levels, so I had time to apply. It really, I didn't care about my A levels at all. All I was doing was treading water till the point I could actually apply to join the Navy. So it mattered not a whit to me that I didn't. It made no difference whatsoever to my application, and it didn't make any difference to what I did in the Royal Navy. It was just treading water to get to that point.
Good, thank you. So you're signed up, you're in. What was it like being as a recruit, as a Wren, and one of the last, well, the last intake?
The list group, yeah.
Yeah.
So it kind of, there's 2 parts to it, and it's a bit like this throughout my whole career for the Royal Navy. The stuff I was learning, the aspects of military life, you know, doing the marching and then looking after your own kit and all of that, I was like lapping it up. I was good at the lessons. I was really excellent at doing things like the the stripping and shooting and all of that kind of stuff. I really loved it, absolutely loved it. Socially, I was an awkward, you know, inexperienced, naive 18-year-old. And so I, again, had an element of bullying through that basic training period. In fact, to skip later, to give you an indication, 25 years after, was it 25 years? Anyway, a period of time, I think it was 25 or 30 years after we all passed out, there was a weekend put together to have a reunion. And I'd not really kept in contact with anybody, but I got reached out to by one of the people I went through basic training with. And pretty much in the first message, she said about this happening. And also, I'm really sorry for how we treated you during basic training. So it was obvious to even them that actually they didn't treat me particularly well.
What was that? An instructor or
no? These were the other Wrens.
Oh, right, okay. Well, it was a long time coming,
but I did get that apology.
It did get there eventually. Yeah. So naive, maybe not maybe bullied in the training. And how did that affect you? And what sort of drive did that develop for you?
I don't know. I think I'm lucky that I have an element of my own resilience. My parents have experienced some pretty traumatic stuff, and they have been resilient. And I think that is something that they passed down to me, and an element of stubbornness, if you like. But I really wanted to do this job. I loved what I was learning. I loved what I was doing physically and mentally. So I wanted to continue doing that. And also, I wanted to be able to serve the country and serve a purpose, have something that was, meaning more than just a 9 to 5, if you like. So I was determined to continue and do the best I could in that scenario, regardless of the bullying that was happening on the side.
And that's a common trait as well, isn't it? That we join to serve. To serve the community, to serve. I was serving Queen and Country, now it's King and Country.
Yeah.
And and you were too. So that element of serving, when you finished your basic training, what happened then? Where were you going to?
So I finished my basic training. They asked about whether I wanted to do sea service, and I said, yes, please. So off I went to HMS Mercury to do my secondary training as a radio operator. And I was the class leader of the first mixed sex class that went through HMS Mercury for radio operator training. So that was quite a coup and quite an amazing thing. It was hard work. It was hard doing the lessons, but it was also hard being in that position of authority, which that's not something I'd ever experienced before. So difficult but rewarding in many ways. Still not exactly the most popular girl on the block, but it was better in secondary training than it was beforehand. And once that was finished and I passed out and completed all of that, then we went off to do our sea training. So back to Raleigh to do, I don't know, knots and God knows what, I can't remember, and do all the emergency training that you do, swimming in your full clothing and so forth. Get all that done. And then once I'd finished all of that, I was sent to my first draft. And that was HMS Cornwall, which was a Type 22 Batch 3 frigate, and we were the first women to go aboard her. So that was quite tough, because I'm sure you are aware, and I'm sure that you've talked to other female veterans before, especially around that time, there was a lot of resistance, shall we say, to the idea of having women aboard ship. And there was a huge amount of misogyny and bullying just around the fact that you were female. And in my case, I was female and also perceived to be gay. Now, I wasn't sure of my sexuality when I joined, and it was certainly far more interesting and forceful in me to be serving my country than having a relationship or something. So I wasn't exploring any of that. I wasn't, but people think these things, and to a degree they're right sometimes. So being on board that ship had its amazing things. I mean, I was so lucky with my first draft. That ship was a great one to serve on. had a small enough company that you could kind of get to know people without it being like an aircraft carrier size where you've got hundreds and hundreds of people around you, or thousands even. And we were lucky with the places that we went. We did a workup, we did basic sea training, we did stuff around the UK, but we also did West Indies guardship. So I got to do like the boy's own adventure, if you like, join the Navy, see the world, right? So I got to go and see America and Canada, the Bahamas, even Belize, and actually visit some of these places. And you look back on it, you think, how lucky was I to go out to these amazing spaces within that context? But on the other side of it, there is still that element of bullying, misogyny, homophobia that's all going on underneath it.
I think that, as you say, I have spoken to other women veterans who are Navy, and I think that in the Army, I mean, I was in the Army 1981 to 88, so that was swing the light, that was going pull up a sandbag, that was way back when misogyny was definitely a thing, and then in 94, and so I recognize exactly what you're talking about, and in the early 90s, like whether they should have women on a ship, whether it was a distraction, what was going to be, everyone would be marrying each other and getting relationships, and they'd be messing around. And I mean, it seems to forget that in an operational sense, you haven't got time for that.
No.
You just got to do your job.
Yeah.
And I think that if you can compartmentalize that, partition it, and accept that people are different and have responsibilities and recognize that. And of course, there are a few bad eggs, I suppose, who occasionally, but majority of people just do the jobs well and do it to the best of their ability. So you mentioned about your sexuality and how, and at the time you were totally focused on your job. What was it about that period that was a aha moment or a challenge for you?
I think the atmosphere in the Navy, and I would suggest probably the wider military at the time, was very much that it was starting to be the death throes of that particular ban. And at the time, there was a really huge focus on basically getting rid of as many of us horrible homosexuals as they possibly could. It was a witch hunt era. You know, you'd have stories in the paper about, you know, half the hockey team at HMS Dryad was discharged because they were all found to be lesbians, and you know, this, that, and the other was all happening in the various services. So there was a huge atmosphere of homophobia around, and so military life is a hot box anyway. And when you add in these spices of specific things that are outlawed, then it becomes much more something that you're going to focus upon. And if you're already, like I was, you know, not exactly fitting in anyway, so immediately I'm going to be the focus of anything that's potentially going to be different, right? So I would, I mean, even on the ship, right? So we were on West Indies guardship, and the radio operators, somebody decided it would be a good idea to do a pretend radio station, an internal ship radio station. So they did it, and they had callers in, and you know, played records, blah blah blah. Anyway, somebody thought it'd be very funny to do a request for Emma Riley, and the request was Tammy Wynette, "Stand by your man." And of course, the first words are, "Sometimes it's hard to be a woman."
Yeah, right.
And it's just like, come on.
And so, how did that make you feel? Because I can see that the person who did that may have thought it was a bit of a joke and a bit of a laugh. For you,
it's just a layer upon layer of exclusion and othering, as you would say nowadays. It just makes you feel that thing that I wanted, not just to serve my country, but to belong, that was constantly being pulled further away from me at every point in time. And yet I was good at what I was doing. From an operational perspective, there was no issue.
Yeah.
When three of us took the exams to move from RO2 to RO1, I was the one that passed, not the other two. You know, it's
Fabulous. So so the relationship, once that happened, the relationship with the Navy and the crew, how was that affected, and what did you start recognizing in yourself?
I just withdrew more than anything else. And I became more and more upset. And to be fair, I was feeling more and more like that it was likely I was gay. I wasn't attracted to guys at all. And I did have crushes on women. And it just, in that atmosphere about there being this ban in place, and it was so terrible to be homosexual, you sort of try and keep everything within yourself. So you're using a huge amount of your own mental power just to make sure you don't say or do anything that might, you know, bring suspicion upon yourself. And so most of the time you succeed, sometimes you don't. So you might get a bit of attention at some point. And so that just makes you crumple even further inside yourself. So you're totally isolated in that sense, even though you are surrounded by hundreds of people and working with them, interacting with them, you know, going out with them. There's still this huge barrier between you and the rest of the ship's company because you're so afraid of what might happen.
Well, I regret that for you, and I don't think it should have happened, really. We both know, though, don't we, that some people can be cruel, and it's not that great. So you were on for a flying career when you came in. What point did you say, this might not be going to plan?
So that point came not of my own choosing. So in 93, so I joined in 93, 93 was a difficult year because my father had been having heart problems for years, but this was the year when they diagnosed that he needed to have a quadruple bypass operation. So he was extremely ill. He went in for this operation and they had to open him up a second time because they had to recauterize the wounds. It was really dodgy at one point. Recovery was difficult. He had blackouts and all sorts of things going on. So there's a lot of family stress. And separately, there's still all of this thing going on in my head about, am I gay? Am I not? Am I gay? Am I not? So I went out one day on my own in London. I looked at Time Out to find out where the gay people went, and I found somewhere that I went, and I kissed somebody and sort of was like, okay, this feels right. This is probably what I am. And there is a moment where you go, okay, at least that question is answered. Now I have to just go, right, forget all of that, go back to my day job. This is what I want to do and carry on serving my country, right? So there's all of this mental stress going on, and I'm up in Scotland at the submarine base up there, and I'm doing ComSend work. And so I was sharing a room with somebody. We went out one evening for a drink, just as you do.
Yeah.
Whatever. And somewhere in that conversation, I said, I think I might be gay. And at that moment, that person was perfectly supportive, you know, and there was this sort of slight euphoria. I've said it out loud, and you know, the world hasn't come crashing down. This person seems to be okay with it. I think this is going to be okay, and then I can just go back and carry on. I've not had a relationship with anybody, wasn't intending to, and I was just wanting to say something out loud, I think, and be reassured. So that happened, and it was pretty much the next morning. It was get up, get dressed, get downstairs, you're under arrest, because she'd phoned up the military police and reported me for what I'd said. So they arrested me.
So at this point, right, let me just get this really clear. The only word you'd uttered was I think I might be gay. You hadn't made a pass at her.
No.
Hadn't made any improper suggestion, nothing. And then the next morning, this is back in 1993, the next morning, there was a storm patrol came in and said, get your kit on, get out of bed, or get out of bed, get your kit on,
Yeah,
you do the rest.
yeah, basically. That's
So
the short of it.
for saying, I think I might be gay.
Mm.
So what was going on in your mind?
I honestly, it's really difficult to pin it down. Dead panic, fear, because I knew what the consequences were if that came to pass. I knew that was the end of it. Uh, uh, Numbness. And so you do what they say because you do what you're told. You get up, you get dressed, you get downstairs, and you go and get interrogated. And I can't tell you how long that was. Hours. I don't know how long. I can't tell you exactly the questions they asked me. I've blocked it out of my memory. I do remember that at one point I got so upset that they had to turn the recording off and stop for 15 minutes. Now, there were two SLB officers, and there was a chief friend who was supposedly my support during this interrogation. Anyway, I got upset. They stopped the clock and stopped the tape machine, and we had this break. And I said something to that chief friend in that break, possibly to do with me going to London, like I said before. I honestly, I can't recall. And the moment that that tape got turned back on and it was recording, this chief wren told those two SIB officers what I'd said. So it was really clear nobody was on my side. This chief wren was not there for me. There was nobody who was going to be helping me. So I'm fully isolated in this point. I'm, done. That's it.
Yeah, I can empathize with you there because the military justice sometimes isn't that unbiased, isn't that objective at all.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting dilemma when you think someone who is defending you then becomes the snake in the grass.
Yeah, effectively. Yeah.
So it was. What was the sequence of events after that? Was it how quickly did it move?
Not hugely tricky. So they interrogated me, and then once that interrogation was done, they took me up to my room and they ransacked through everything. But they did, before they went in to start searching, they stood me outside and said, and I do remember this pretty clearly. One of them said to me, "Do you have any electrical equipment?"
Right.
And I said,
Yeah, I've got a light. And
well, I mean, I said, if you mean dildos and vibrators, no, but please feel free to search the rest of the women's block. I mean, my point in saying this is not just that it happened, but the sorts of things they were doing was anything to humiliate or destabilize you so that you would admit more, basically. And what they're really looking for is not just your confession and proof of it, but they're also looking for other people. So what they were looking for in my belongings was letters, something that would tell them other personnel that they could go and hunt down in their little witch hunt that they were doing. Now, fortunately for me, I didn't have any of that. They did take some of my letters because I had a pen pal who was outside of the Royal Navy, and I'd said to that person the same sort of things. So they had one piece of physical evidence against me, but they also took a suede album, and because that album cover happened to have two androgynous people on the front of it, there could have been two women or two men or one of each. As it happens, it was two men, I found out later. And they also took a Julian Clary video, because of course anybody who watches the camp comedian Julian Clary must be gay, right?
I used to watch Julian Clary.
Most of Middle England did.
And I thought he was hilarious. He was a bit, he's a little bit camp. Well, he was a lot camp actually.
He was a lot camp.
He was funny.
Yes. So that's what I mean about it being in some ways a tool to humiliate you and destabilize you, because they want to make sure that they get everything they can out of you. So that happened. There was a period of time they moved me out of the room I was sharing with this person who dobbed me in, but I was still living in the same block. They moved me out of direct work contact with her because she was in the comm center as me, and so I didn't work directly with her. I was shoved somewhere else to work, but I was still eating in the same mess. You're walking around the base or in the mess or whatever, literally everybody knows what's going on with you. So nobody wants anything to do with you. And you feel incredibly isolated. Now, I was lucky that I had a couple of people who were very nice and very supportive. There was another Wren, a leading Wren, and a Royal Navy photographer. Both of those two people, I think I would have been probably lost without. They they sent me home to tell my parents. So I don't recall exactly how that happened, but they sent me home and I had to turn up at my parents' doorstep and tell them that I'd been arrested for this and that I was probably going to be thrown out. And that's probably one of the hardest points in the whole set of circumstances, because they were so proud of me serving in the Royal Navy, so proud that I was terrified of how they were going to react, and so horrible, felt so horrible about disappointing them. And I asked my mum about it a few years ago because I wanted to know what her impressions of that moment were, and she said it took me about 5 or 6 hours to stop before I could stop crying long enough to actually tell them what the problem was. Now, I remember, it's kind of burnt on my memory. I remember the room that I told them in. I remember where they were sitting. It's like it literally is burnt on my memory. Yeah. I remember the emotions of that day. And I can only be nothing but thankful that my parents were supportive, because having spoken to many people now, many people did not have the same sort of supportive family scenario when they were discharged. And that could have been the straw that broke the camel's back, couldn't it? If they hadn't been supportive. If they've not been supportive, what do you do? I mean, many of people, you end up homeless. You literally end up camping outside of the base doors because you literally don't know what to do with yourself. So I was lucky. They were supportive, but I still had to go back up to the base and face the final music. And I think it took, it was like the beginning of September that they arrested me. And I think it was 4 weeks later or something that they brought me up to captain's table. And it's, you're brought up to captain's table in your number ones, and you hear the words uttered that services no longer required, discharge shore. You've got 48 hours to leave the base, return all your kit. So you do what you're told. That is pretty good. So the only thing you'd done at this stage, right, was say, I think I might be gay. I'm sure at some point during that interrogation, I would have admitted that I was gay. Under pressure and duress, yeah, then that's understandable. But what I'm talking about really is what you'd actually done. Yeah, literally. In fact, hilariously, there was a little bit in the paper about it later on, and on the front of the pink paper, there's this little tiny bit saying "celibate lesbian thrown out." Really? Yeah, seriously. So 4 weeks, and then you're out. I think it was, that was it, 4 weeks, and then 48 hours to leave the base. My parents came and picked me up. I packed all my stuff into my kit bag and then took it down to the storeroom and unceremoniously dumped it out on the floor. My one act of defiance. And also I kept anything that wasn't on my kit list, right? So I've got a cap, a shirt, a tie, and my great coat. I think you've earned that. So yeah. Now, so SNLR, service is no longer required. How, and within 4 weeks, when you hadn't done anything wrong, how did that make you feel? And I'll just elaborate on that question. Usually speaking, I ask about whether a transition from the military to Civvy Street was easy or difficult. Right. You've been unceremoniously kicked out for doing nothing. Yeah, I know people who were kept in the military because they did a lot worse than that. Yeah. And they went to certain regiments, if you know what I mean. Yes, I do. So
Yeah, how did that make you feel?
It's really difficult to describe. You've got to think, right? The military is not just a job. It is your life, your play, your friends, your social life, your purpose in life.
Mm,
And all of that is gone in an instant,
yeah,
never to return. You've got no way back. And you have to redraw your entire map of the world. You have to work out what in the heck you're going to do for a job. You also have to work out who you are, because your
mm,
identity, generally speaking, is quite wrapped up in the fact that you're a Wren or Royal Navy or Army or whatever it might be. So it's a total transition and forced. So I spent, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks probably holed up in my parents' house in my room and just was numb. But I go back to that resilience that my parents sort of gifted me, if you like. And I was lucky enough or resilient enough to feel that I needed to get up and do something. You have to kind of put one foot in front of the other and do the next right thing for you. And that, for some people, might have just been getting up and showering for the first time in 5 weeks. For me, it was getting up and looking at what was I going to do for a job. And so
yeah,
you look at the skills that you come out of the Navy with. So I can shoot an SA-80, not that useful. Morse code, yeah, flags, not that useful. But radio operators got taught how to touch type.
yeah,
And I passed out at 65 words per minute. So that was something that I could use in civilian life. So I went to a temp agency and said, I can type, I can organize, whatever. What can I do? And I ended up doing like temp jobs for a while. I don't actually know how long. And through that, I ended up sort of doing some filing work for a particular company who then had a job opening. And so I started working for them. And it was literally, I'm 21, 22. I'm doing file clerk work, somebody that a 16-year-old would do straight out of school, something like that. And I'm starting right at that level, not having a clue what I'm going to do for the rest of my career. And you just work it out as you go. So I did that for a while, and then I'm quite helpful. I like being useful. That service thing again.
yeah,
And so I started doing things like I was quite good at changing the toner cartridge in the printer and changing the fax machine roll and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, well, I'm a bit technical. I quite like the computers. And so I applied for a job that was a help desk call handler, not fixing anything, just taking the calls and logging the tickets. And so I did that for a couple of years. But as I was doing it, I learned how to fix stuff, and I started making it into a frontline, first line fix thing. And so when I'd done that for a couple of years, I thought, well, I'll apply for that role over there. That's an IT analyst, physically fixing PCs. And so from there, I then, that was in Croydon. And so then I took over my boss's role. So I managed somebody for the first time. And then I went to the London office and did 4 people. And then I managed, it's just all been, as I've got bored or an opportunity has come up, I've shifted slightly. But I mean, for the last 25 years, I've been in the same group company.
yeah.
I haven't shifted beyond it. I've gone to different companies in the group. But I've ended up being a project manager and an operations manager for a privacy office for our company. And I literally could not have told you that that was where I was going to end up, or frankly, if I'm going to continue doing that.
Yeah.
I've got no idea.
And so here's a question for you, right? Because we talked about failure is not fatal. How do you deal with failure? What's the mechanism? What's the process that you go through when you recognize that stuff's not quite right? What do you do? Because there must be something inside you that just flicks.
So you have to be self-aware enough, I think, to recognize that something is no longer right for you. And from a work perspective, I've been reasonably good at that, in the sense that I have known when I've come to the end of when I'm really enjoying it or really useful about it. On the flip side, I've not been actually very good at then making that move quick enough. So I've spent maybe 7 years in a role when I probably should have spent 4, for example. And that's partly to do with imposter syndrome, in the sense that I don't believe I'm good enough to be able to take on something else, because I'm worthless. I think the military got rid of me, so I can't really be any good. Why should I have responsibility for doing this and all that kind of stuff? So there's always been this sort of back and forth between, I kind of recognize that something's not right now, but I'm not quite sure how to make that move, which is why so many of my moves have been opportunity led rather than in my own sort of, I've gone out searching to find a new opportunity, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, and one of the things that I like to look at is, and something that you touched on when we were talking about transitioning from the military, SA80, no. Other stuff, no. The fact is, though, there were a lot of soft skills, weren't there? And people,
Yes.
when I'm speaking to veterans or people who are not even left the military yet, sometimes they're not able to see how the skills that they develop in the military are so fundamentally important in civistry. How do you find that the skills are transferable?
I'm certainly at decades after I got thrown out. I'm a lot more aware of it. And you know, that moment when I was that young kid at 21 trying to work out what the heck I was going to do, that was very practical. What I was thinking about, what can I physically do?
Yeah.
Right now I look at it and think about it. If you think about the sorts of interpersonal skills that you learn when you're in the military, those are very transferable. So in a project management role, so organization, managing without managing people, you know, having those key stakeholder conversations, knowing how to communicate to those higher up and also those beneath you, using the structures and knowing where you can push, where you don't. That's all something that you can learn in the military, and just, you know, turning up on time and doing it.
Yeah. And I would imagine that, you know, where a company has an equality policy and a manager may be paying lip service to it, where you're talking about when you know when to push and when to lay off, and how to listen and understand. I would imagine that you're pretty adept at that now, of making someone feel comfortable and not isolated, if that makes sense.
It's part of my, well, so there are a few things that can happen, I think, to you when you go through trauma like that. You can either get subsumed by it, or you can try and use it for something good. Now, for me, I've tried to fall on the second thing. And part of that is knowing and working out your own values so that you can then play to them and use them in your own life or work. So my values are very, very, very much centered around, unsurprisingly, fairness, truth, and being loyal. So I absolutely detest anything that's unfair. And that means that in a work scenario, if somebody is not being listened to, then I will champion that person. Or if somebody is being excluded for some reason, then I will make sure that they feel included. I run a team in Manila in the Philippines, and I try and coach them to make sure that they feel that they are empowered to do the role that I have trained them to do, because they should have some control and agency over everything that they're doing. So it's working out those core values of yourself and finding a place that you can use those core values to best effect.
Yeah, and those words that partition things, macro management, micro management, and I like cutting people's slack and letting them discover how to do the job. I say, right, this is what I want doing. These are the parameters. Off you go. See if you can do it.
Yeah. There's no stupid question. There's no problem. If you make a mistake, say something about it so that we can fix it and learn from it. That's it.
So while I'm on this, because I think that if a manager listening to this, or someone who manages people wants to get better results, give me I'm not going to put a number on it. You can choose the number. Give me some top tips that you think are useful to develop a workforce that has ownership, responsibility, and feels like they're part of a team.
I think it's leading with example is the key one for me. If you are being open and honest about a mistake that you have made, and that is communicated to a team that you manage in a way that shows that it's fine to make a mistake, here's the solution, or a bunch of solutions that we're going to pick from, that gives them the opportunity and the safe space to be able to say their own issues that they're coming up with. Encouraging and consistently saying there is no stupid question. You can ask it as many times as you need, particularly when you're training people and bringing people into it.
Yeah.
You need to be able to have that safe space to ask it. If you can do those two things, then you should be able to give people the psychological safety to actually take a chance and do what they feel is necessary. I literally just had that conversation with one of my staff today. She'd done something off her own back to improve a situation with her and a stakeholder. And then she'd had a crisis of confidence thinking, I shouldn't have done that without asking about it. And I said, no, this is exactly what I've empowered you to do. You have the authority, the empowerment to do the job the way that you feel is going to be best for you and for the stakeholder, and crucially, for those people who are going to read the assessments that you're gathering the information for. So it's communication, I suppose, is also really the bottom line. Listening, communicating in the way that the person will understand. So context switching, depending on who you're talking to, and just making sure that you're clear.
Thank you. And you said you've made a statement or a phrase. You've used the phrase a number of times, like there's a stupid question. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. There's no such thing as a stupid question. I've said this to my sons. The only stupid question is the one you didn't ask, because you will leave without knowing the answer. And I'll bet you, if you're in a collective of other people, there'll be at least one other person that wants that answer.
Correct.
So it's really important you ask that. Fantastic. So you mentioned there were a few people that helped you through the dark times. How important is it, do you think, to have a good coach and or mentor, someone that you can lean on when you need to?
I think it's something that I didn't experience until probably the last 5 years, really. So having now experienced it, I think if you can find somebody like that, then that's an amazing thing. I basically got ditched and had my parents to lean on. And, you can have a good relationship with your parents and you can get a lot out of that. But somebody who's totally external to that original setup is really, really helpful. I mean, I basically turned my life around myself and actually took the UK to the European Court of Human Rights to help change the law so that nobody else had to go through it as well. So I did those alone, if you like. I had general support from my parents, general support from my girlfriend at the time, but that was my decision and my process that I took through. I didn't get coached to do it and I didn't get specific support to do it. But having, over the last 5 years, had the people around me that I do, and particularly my boss in my company now, I can see that had I had somebody of that type earlier in my career, I probably would have had a very different career, honestly, rather than the sort of wiggly opportunity, boredom-led career that I actually have had.
Well, thank you. So what are you doing now? What are you driving towards? Because I know you're heavily involved with the LGBT financial recognition scheme, and you're a panel member, an independent panel member. And I know I've interviewed Craig Jones. He's been on the podcast in the past, and I know you know each other. What's your driving force now to see equality and not exclusion?
I think with regards to LGBT veterans, I would salute Craig. And hilariously, in fact, I met him on the BBC Breakfast sofa in 2020 when we were both interviewed for the 20th anniversary of the lifting of the ban. And in the green room, we discovered that we both served on HMS Cornwall together. So he was actually one of my officers. And so from that point, I'd sort of got involved a bit in Fighting with Pride and watched and helped where I could to get that whole process of the independent review done. And then I was lucky enough to be one of 2 veterans actually in the Houses of Parliament, looking down at Rishi Sunak when the Prime Minister gave the apology to LGBT veterans. So I sort of done as much as I could, in that scenario. But when you look, the reason I accepted the job on the panel is a couple of reasons. One is it's making something good out of something horrible. That's, very strong.
Yeah.
Another is it really plays to my core values of fairness and being fair to everybody. And because of my experience, because I'm the only person on that panel who has been investigated and has been dismissed, I have a unique, and also I'm not an officer because that's the other thing. I'm just a rating. I have a really unique.
No. You're not just a rating. You're a rating.
Well, anyway, I have a really unique, perspective on these cases that we are asked to review and come to an answer on, and so I took it because it's important to me for those first 2 reasons, but it's really important to me to be able to advocate for somebody who's not in the room, who's not got a voice in that conversation, who maybe has had to go through a really, really difficult time to just write those words on that piece of paper and send that in to us. Because as much as I can talk to you about what happened to me, and there are many years of and layers of sort of cushioning, if you like, between the trauma and how I speak about it now. I've become a little practiced at it. I've said it a few times, so it becomes a little easier every time you do it. But there's always that, it's always going to be an open, a slightly healed scab wound that gets picked a certain amount of time. But for some of these veterans, this is the first time they're really opening that Pandora's box and having to re-look at that trauma and describe it to get, £1,000 to £20,000. We're not talking huge amounts of money here. Yeah. This is not a compensation scheme. If it was a true compensation scheme, you'd be looking at hundreds of thousands of pounds for so many people, because the how can I put this? The military went so far beyond a duty of care and a duty of responsibility to the requirements of the rules in all of these investigations. It's shocking, to say the least.
Yeah,
and I have to be in the room to be able to champion somebody who's in that situation. You can see it when you read through their testimonies, how difficult these things are to actually come out. So that's my purpose here.
Well, thank you for doing that. And I mean, I can understand entirely where you're coming from when you say £1,000 to £20,000, whereas you get someone in America who, a lady who spilt a hot cup of coffee in her lap and then got, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, admittedly, right, being burnt by a hot cup of coffee is a bit stressful. Maybe not on the same in the same level. And forgive me if you've spilled hot coffee on you from a fast food centre, but I mean, I think that the people you're defending and the people you're offering a service to do require recompense, most definitely. So what's the one top tip you give to someone leaving the military or a veteran leaving the military who wants to perform well? And it can be for someone who's LGBT, or it can be just generally speaking on how to overcome difficulty and just crack on.
It's so difficult to give one tip because literally everybody is so different that one tip might be right for one but not for another. I think
give a couple then.
Well, do the next right thing for you. Put one step in front of the other. You can do no more than that. And as I said earlier, if that one step forward is getting up and showering that day. Great, good on you. You know, if that's all you can do, that's fine. That's all good. If all you can do is get up and look at your face in the mirror and be okay with that, great, go for it. You know, don't be hard on yourself, because this is a massive change. There's a huge change between being in the military and being in civilian life. Even if you have all the support that is now out there for transitioning personnel, it's still a very big psychological shift from one type of scenario to another. So forgive yourself and give yourself time to get used to it. Reach out as well. That's another thing. We're taught quite a lot, or at least when I was there, we were taught quite a lot that you just dig in and get on with stuff. But actually, really, quite a lot of the time, you should reach out and ask for help. And there's no shame in that. That's what a lot of these services are out there to do. So in short, put one step in front of the other, whatever that means for you, and reach out if you need to. Don't be ashamed of that.
Thank you. And what does the future hold for you now, Emma?
Well, 2 years of panel and getting through those cases as quickly as we possibly can. That's the main focus at the moment. And then around that, well, you know, I have a family. I have a choir that I sing with as my spare time, fun stuff, and just general life. You know, doing my job and enjoying life with my family.
Fantastic. And how can people get in touch with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn and I have a website, emmariley.uk, I think it is. I have to remember that. But yeah, if you look at Emma Riley on LinkedIn, you'll find me, I'm sure.
Well, Emma, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your time on this podcast. And thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you. And remember, if you want to successfully become, visit joeteams.com. That's JOETEAMS.com, where there's lots of resources to help you achieve the success you deserve and desire. So, and until we meet again, have a brilliant day. Thank you.
JoeTeams.com is a resource I've created to fulfill my mission to help 1 million veterans and business entrepreneurs like you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations they deserve. JoeTeams.com is jam-packed full of valuable resources specifically designed to help you on your journey to success. Visit JoeTeams.com now to find out how you can join and start your journey to success immediately. That's joeteams.com, JOETEAMS, joeteams.com. And until we meet again, have a brilliant day.